أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر اللهم اجعلنا من الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر آمين يا رب العالمين. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. Inshallah ta'ala, we are starting our final session on Surat Asar. This has been a series that's been going on at the Irving Islamic Center for the past 3 weeks. We've been trying to wrap up some lessons from Surat Asar since then, but hopefully we can get to the conclusion of it bi'idhnillah today. What we've already covered are the first 2 ayat in a lot of detail, and we are going to spend a good amount of time discussing the final ayah and the relationship between the 4 pieces of that final ayah. Even in regards to the last ayah, a lot of commentary was already offered in the last session, but we'll just go and do a basic overview inshallah ta'ala and wrap things up. The first things first. In the world we live in, and as we live, we all already mentioned that the 4 conditions of success that Allah mentions in Surat Asar are not associated with success in the world around us. In other words, if you ask any person, an average even Muslim or non, when you ask them what it means to be successful, the things that don't come in their mind are iman, or righteous deeds, or enjoining truth and enjoining patience and pursuit. These are not the things that come in their mind. Career, education, wealth, establishment, family. These are the kinds of things that come in people's minds when they think about success. So the first thing that the surah is demanding from us as far as our change in attitude is really, it demands from us to think about success and failure in a way that most people don't. And this sets us apart from everybody else. Then, when you do experience this change in thought, then before this change, the things that seemed unimportant or irrelevant or minuscule become very heavy. And the things that used to be really, really important become less and less and less important. The way you prioritize things, it changes because of the attitude demanded in these last 4 conditions to salvation. Now, as far as the first condition is concerned, and we're just talking about just a common observation. I'm not going to use much academic terminology today because we're done with that part of the surah study before. A lot of people don't associate iman with anything other than just a statement. They just say, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, I'm done, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Maybe a little bit of, we just go to the masjid sometimes, pray some, not even regular prayer, maybe Jama'ah, right? But the idea, why do Muslims behave in this way, the vast majority of them, obviously you could claim it as a lack of knowledge, but really what it is an attitude. And the attitude is, I'm already saved because I have iman. Iman is the only condition. Now there are 2 problems with that attitude. The first problem is the assumption that we have iman. The second problem is the assumption that iman alone is enough. So the 2 problems with that. So let's address the first problem. To assume that we have iman, we first have to understand what does it mean to have iman. And what it means what iman means is 2 things. You could think of it from a legal point of view, and you could think of it from a reality point of view. From a legal point of view, anyone who says La ilaha illallah, anyone who says Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has what? They have iman. When Allah says Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, those of you who believe, who's He talking to? Anyone who says the shahada. Everyone who says the shahada is included in that address. When you look at someone and they say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh, if they say salam to you, what's your automatic assumption about them? They have iman. They've met that baseline condition. So this however is from a worldly legal point of view. Legally speaking, anyone who claims to be Muslim is Muslim. And they have, for us then in that sense, Islam is no different than iman. They're essentially the same thing. Faith and Islam are the same. But then there's the matter of that distinction that Allah Himself makes in Surah Al-Hujurat, where He says, قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. The Bedouins say we have iman. Tell them no, you only have Islam. You've only accepted Islam. And Iman, وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانِ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Iman hasn't entered your hearts yet. In other words, in this statement we learned that what people assume to be Iman happens to be what according to Allah? Islam. That's just Islam. And where does Iman rest? Iman doesn't rest on the tongue. According to this ayah, where does Iman rest? In the heart. So now it's a change of thought. The one who assumes that they have Iman based on what they said with their tongue is already being given a change of attitude. They're being told, no, Iman is something else. It's in the heart. Now there are many things that are talked about in the Quran in regards to the heart, but at least 3 things that I'd like to share with you in regards to this discussion that I think are paramount. At least 3 things I'm going to highlight. Because the terminology of Surat Asar is very simple, but at the same time it's very complex. Because when you say Iman, well, 2/3 of the Quran is talking about Iman. Right? So when you say إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا and you want to explore in the Quran, what does it mean, those who believe? Then you're really engaged in pretty much the entire Quran study. Right? It's a complex thing. So we have to pick and choose at least some things to give this discussion some structure. What does it mean to have Iman in the heart? Well, what I'm going to reduce this discussion to is there are 3 things that Allah mentions predominantly that rest inside the heart. There are 3 things inside the heart. The first thing we just mentioned. What is it? Iman. Right? وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانِ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. So that's the first thing inside the heart. The second thing we find is revelation. The Messenger ﷺ was told, نَزَلَ بِهِ الرُّحُ الْأَمِينَ عَلَى قَلْبِكَ. The angel Jibreel, he brought it down on your heart. Revelation came onto the heart of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Allah talks about the people of knowledge, He says, "Bal huwa ayatun bayyinatun fi sudur alladhina utul ilm." In Surah Al-Ankabut, these are miraculous signs in the chests of those who have been given knowledge. In other words, the second thing inside the heart, the first thing is Iman, the second is revelation. Revelation. When we memorize Quran, when we internalize the reminder of Quran, if we really internalize it, it's not on your tongue and it's not in your head. Where is it? It's in your heart. فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ. In the chests of those who've truly been given knowledge. And it's interesting that Allah put knowledge there, because usually we associate knowledge with our mind, not with our chest, not with our heart. Right? So He combined those 2 concepts together. So the first thing was Iman, the second thing was the ayat, the revelation. The third thing that's mentioned, associated over and over again, among others, there are other things, but the thing that's associated most with the heart is actually dhikr, remembrance. Remembrance and reminder. That's associated constantly with the heart. So Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَلَا تُطِعْ مَنْ أَغْفَلْنَا قَلْبَهُ عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا. Don't follow the one whose heart is void of our remembrance. So what's missing from the heart? Remembrance. He says, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنَّ الْقُلُوبِ. Know that by the remembrance of Allah, hearts become tranquil. So, the third thing associated with the heart is remembrance. By the way, the climax of Iman, when you have, your heart is full of Iman, you know what the word for that is? The word is sakina. When your heart is completely filled with Iman, then the gift of that Iman, which we talked about last time, the fruit of that Iman is sakina, which is what Allah talks about in Surat Al-Fath. In Surat Al-Fath, He mentions that Allah sent sakina on the believers into their hearts. Okay? But that's a separate topic. So the 3 core things that I wanted to mention in regards to the heart were Iman itself, then the ayat, and then the third, dhikr, remembrance. I mentioned these 3 things because all of these 3 things are actually part and parcel of the same thing. In other words, when you have ayat in your heart, what does that increase? Your iman. When you remember Allah, what's the best way to remember Allah? The ayat of Allah. And when you remember Him through the ayat, then iman increases. And how do I know these 3 things are connected? Let's turn to Surah Al-Anfal for a moment. This is the 8th surah of the Quran. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم. The true believers are those when Allah is mentioned or remembered, their hearts tremble. When Allah is mentioned or remembered, their hearts tremble. So what is now mentioned next to the heart?